Well, the road to the Garden ending here, conveniently enough, at the TD Garden. I'm joined by ESPN Boston High School's co-editor, Scott Barboza. But first, we're going to jump right into the action, the Division II Girls State Final, going on earlier today against Westwood and Wellesley. Head towards the end of the first period, little bit of a scrum building in front of goalie Megan King, and it's Ellie Dameron able to stuff home the puck and put the Wolverines up 1. Move ahead to the second. Lauren White for Westwood finds Lauren Agizi, who gives a little backhand, flip it right over the glove of King to go up by 2. And later in the second, King is going to keep it in play for Wellesley, and then she's going to wish she hadn't. Olivia Fay with a nice pass through 2 defenders right in front to Jamie Burke. Wellesley would get a couple late in this one, but it was already pretty much decided at that point as Westwood wins their first state title in school history by the score of 6-2. Now, Scott, girls lacrosse fans in the state know that these two teams have a bit of a rivalry for the good chunk of the last decade. Wellesley never able to get over the hump in the playoffs against these guys. It turns out this way in the finals as well. People are going to look at the score today and say, well, 6 goals allowed by Megan King. Doesn't look like a fair outing by her, but she stopped 35 shots today.
Well, with goaltending, it always comes in volume, and obviously the Wolverines were able to go in excess of 40 shots here against Wellesley. I thought in the first period, King was sensational. I mean, it seemed like before we had hit the 10-minute mark in the first period, Westwood had already put about 18 shots on her, and if not for those amount of saves in the first period, this one could have been a lot worse. Nothing against Megan King on any of those goals, really. In particular, the first 5 of them were just really great skilled plays, great execution, some really great shots there. But she was the reason they got here, and she was very strong again here today.
Now, I do want to talk, you picked Westwood despite being the lower seed in this one. Why did you think that they were the odds-on favorite to win this?
This has kind of been for a couple years here in Division II, and obviously with some of the shuffling around, we got Duxbury playing here in the Division I game. They're obviously out of the picture this year. It kind of felt like it was up to Westwood and or Falmouth. And then when you see those games and the way that they kind of sorted themselves out down in the Cape this week, I thought this Wolverines team was kind of headed in the right direction. Coach Justin DeSorger talked about this was a work in progress when he inherited this team. Very different complexion than what it has now as a state champion. This group has really been together. As you mentioned, there's a lacrosse tie in there. This is a very tight group. You see a lot of the same common names on those rosters that led this team as well. So it's kind of been a work in progress for this Westwood group. They've been close. They've been knocking at the door. They've been in the semifinals in the last 2 years leading up to this year. Then obviously getting over that hump and winning outright and going away today.
Now, if it is any consolation to Wellesley, I want to give a little shout out to Wellesley media announcer Robbie Johnson. He made the point on air today. No seniors on this team, so I think we could probably expect to possibly see them back here next year. But we're going to move on now to the Division III boys final. That went on between Hanover and Shrewsbury. We go ahead about 5 minutes in. Hanover breaking things open as its captain Matt McDougall picking up the rebound and finding the back of the net to put the Indians on front by 1. Things would take a turn before the end of the period as Matt Dillon comes up and feeds a beautiful one-timer to Dan Quinlivan, camped out in front of the net to tie things up at 1. Less than a minute later, Hanover tries to clear the zone, but instead it gets right on the stick of Cole Vincent-Kerr, who rips one glove side to put Shrewsbury up 2-1. And watch this. Final seconds of the first period, Matt Dillon flicks it towards the net, gets a nice little redirection by Quinlivan for the goal. But hold on a second. Clock reads no time left. The ref convenes with the goal judge, and eventually the goal stands. So as we take a look at this freeze frame, looks like they got this one right.
Yeah, and of course the big part here, any hockey coach will always preach. You hear Claude Julien say this: goals can either make or break a team at the end and the beginning of a period. And Shrewsbury really did all the above. They get the goal, it's a good call, and then also they follow it up with a quick goal to start the next period.
We move to the start of the second. Dave Belden keeping momentum in Shrewsbury's favor as things would get pretty ugly from there. The Colonials go on to take this one by the final of 7-1, and they are your 2014 Division III state champions. Now, Scott, Shrewsbury, a team you kind of predicted early on in the year, and turned out to be right.
Well, I mean, coming into it, I think Shrewsbury had really coming into the season, they were the team to beat statewide, I think. We had them in the top 25 poll to start the season. They'll obviously finish it that way as well. Kind of a surprise. We thought Watertown would be the team to come out of Eastern Mass. Hanover with a very nice run. This is a team that was hovering around 500 at the midpoint of the season. They run off 9 straight wins through the end of the regular season and the playoffs to get here. So obviously a credit to Coach Evans' team. But I think this Shrewsbury team from day one, I mean, it was really their derby to lose.
Now we have one more game before we wrap up the first half of our finals recap, and that was the Division I boys final, and that went on between Braintree and Reading. 7 minutes into the first period, Michael Thompson skating up, centers for Jake Barbera, slipping it past Braintree goalie Nick Anson to put the Rockets up 1-0. Late in the period, Matt Thompson by the dot winds up and blasts another one past Anson to give Reading a 2-0 lead. That would be the score after one. Move ahead late in the second. Braintree cuts the deficit back down to 1 as the senior Nick Ward flicking one glove side past Ian Lapham. The Rockets would respond quickly. Sean Verrier with a nice move and the snipe as he hits the ice. Reading would add an empty netter in the third as they earn the Division I crown by the final of 4-1. Now, Scott, Reading hit a little bit of a lull shortly, sort of going into the tournament a little bit before. Obviously, they found their groove, though. They are your Division I champions for this year.
Yeah, it was kind of an interesting blueprint this year. This was a team in Reading last year, a very senior-laden team, a team I thought was really going to make a deep run into the Super 8, which they did. They played Austin Prep very tough. They lost that senior base, kind of had some positions moving in and out of the lineup that were available. In particular, goaltender Ian Lapham acquitted himself very nicely, I thought, in this season. But even in February, this team is kind of at a crossroads. They hit a bump. They had a couple losses in a row, one in particular against Burlington, which of course we know that matchup is always a bellwether in the Middlesex League up there. That's a rival. And they kind of backed their way into the tournament a little bit. But then once they got there, the light just went off. And it almost seems, as I wrote in my preview to this game, with both Reading and Braintree, these kind of felt like two teams of destiny, and which of the roads was going to win out. And for Reading, after coming off again, that I can't underscore how much this game was absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
11-round shootout win against Wilmington. It just kind of felt like today was a fait accompli.
Now Braintree in a little bit of a tough spot, in that play-in game for the Super 8. You have the famous no goal that almost went viral locally around here, and then a tough loss to CM. Need to refocus, get ready for this tournament. They made it all the way here. Yep. How did they fall short?
Yeah, it's been, we've seen that year in, year out. It's always tough for teams to kind of refocus and get ready for the next tournament. You have your heart set on the Super 8. You get to the precipice of it, and then especially for Braintree, to go down in that fashion in a 1-goal game that could have, you can make the extension mathematically that they would have been tied in that game, and then et cetera, et cetera. But they put all that behind them, and they go down south. They go to Gallo, a completely disciplined team, offensively, defensively, neutral zone. I mean, they were really rolling here coming into today. And I think we saw some kind of uncharacteristic things from their play. The defense not quite as aggressive as they have been. I think, you can credit Reading's speed a little bit. But also, they weren't challenging the puck carrier at the blue line. They weren't quite as fine in the neutral zone as they have been, as we've seen in the South tournament coming here today. I think it just it wasn't a good day for Braintree. I still think this is, as we saw, I think really one of the top 15-10 teams in the state. You could put them against anywhere, Super 8 competition included, and they would make a representative effort. So again, a fine season for Coach Fasano and the Womps. Obviously, historic 1-2, their first Division 1 South championship, and then getting back here to the Garden.
There you have it. We're going to have plenty more for you on ESPN Boston High Schools. Loads of updates, more recap videos, interviews with players, coaches, all throughout the day. Mike Riley's going to join Scott later on to finish out the rest of the evening's highlights. But for now, he's Scott Barboza. I'm Greg Story. Keep it tuned to ESPN Boston High Schools.